right, Aaron Goldstein, thanks so much for having us.
My pleasure.
This is a great place. So we're at Baldwin Street Sound. Is that right?
That's right.
So I want to ask you about how you got started in this whole thing, but fast forward to how we're in this building right here, because I know this is relatively new for you.
Yeah, I've been here about a year. I had been working at other rooms, most recently Candle recording over at Sterling and Bloor, which was a great place to work. And it just sort of became time to branch out, and I met the fellow who's actually my business partner, who's also a steel player. His name's Abe Levy. Came up from California he came up from California.
Yeah.
And touched base because we're both steel players, and we actually first connected on the Steel Guitar Forum, which is sort of an old school internet forum and a popular way to connect for steel players. And he had sent me a message like ages ago asking if I was touring through, if I wanted to get a beer, and I said yeah, and then that never materialized. Anyway, we sort of were on the hunt to open a spot. Abe's got like a great collection of old steels and amps and stuff that he had to sort of offer the place, and we just decided that it would be an interesting thing to go into business together. And so we searched around for this spot and found this place on Craigslist, which is, it's sort of wild because it's so perfect for a studio. It was less perfect then. We've done some renovation we can talk about, but it's still, even in its original state, was fairly perfect for this purpose. And it was kind of wild that nobody had really pulled the trigger on it. Maybe we saw the potential where other people didn't. But
was there a certain neighborhood in the city that you were looking, or
not really?
Just open to anything?
To be honest, I liked being at Sterling and Bloor before with Candle, and this is a lot more in the core. And that's good. I find that bands who already live downtown are really into riding their bikes here, which is great. I got room for bikes in front.
That's cool.
So that's certainly helpful. But frankly, I've had people coming from out of town too, and so to them, it's not really a concern where I am. You know. And I mean, in those instances, I suppose I'm paying downtown rent frivolously, but I do like the spot quite a bit. The place was originally, the building's built in 1918, and it was Silverstein's Bakery, which now over on McCall Street, they have a huge building that was built in the 50s, mid-50s. Okay. So they would have moved out of here around then. Oh, okay. And really, the bakery was in the front, and then they got busy. This part, we're in the live room now, and this was an extension. They got so busy in the front that they built a secondary bagel oven back here.
Wow. And that's where we're standing here?
We're standing where the oven was.
Man.
And so, and then they built an extension around the oven. So for apparently one spring and summer, the oven was in the backyard, and then they built around it.
Oh, wow.
And so by its nature, the room that I use as the control room was part of the original house, or the original bakery or whatever. And this was an extension. So they have their own foundations. They're sound isolated entirely. So that was a big plus coming in here, was I sort of saw the potential there. And running a snake between the two of them was not difficult.
That's great.
There's no window, and we had talked about a window, but it's not really that practical. And also, the bands seem to like not being watched. To be honest, we communicate by talkback, and that's great for
Or
me.
not being distracted.
Right. Yeah. Even at Candle, there was a window, but you couldn't really see much. You could see sort of the drummer's face.
Yeah.
And so I was already used to communicating by talkback anyway, and it's been fine. It's actually been great.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool. So what was it like when you came in the doors before you signed the lease?
Well, the wall that is behind the camera now was not here. We built this wall, and it separates the front sort of vestibule. There's like sort of a kitchen area, and place for bikes, and there's a bathroom up there. It separates that area and the noise from the alley and all that stuff from what I made into the live room. So we would have walked in from that front door, and we would have walked into this area and seen along this perimeter a brick wall and a brick wall over there. But the remainder of the space was sort of interesting, even though it was an L shape. We figured
this wasn't a problem, the oven?
It did. We didn't see that it posed a huge problem. Like the sound isolation was a big thing, so the two rooms were separate. Yeah. And we figured it's maybe going to be sort of a project studio, and so we didn't really consider that like a real full live room was necessary.
Right.
I mean, I realized that it was necessary, and so I took the steps to sort of get there. But at the time, the drums lived in what is now what we call keyboard corner.
Okay.
And I had a sort of a nice dead zone here.
Oh, this is where the drums were.
Yeah, and that's why the ceiling's treated here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I used it as like a dead drum area. And then the piano was on this wall over here, so that was a problem. If you were playing the piano and you wanted to see the drummer, you had to like look around the corner.
Right.
Which is a bummer, for sure. And we talked about putting up mirrors. Really, the best solution was pulling out the oven. The oven had been decommissioned like decades ago.
Right.
There were chimneys that were already closed. So, you know, on the one hand, I was like, if this oven was still operating, some artisan baker would love to get their hands on it, you know, and I would have maybe, you know, figured that out. But in truth, like having this extra space has been so huge for us. And the room actually sounds great. Like it's sort of hard to calculate what a room is going to sound like when it becomes a new room.
Sure.
But I'm really pleased with how it's.
It just goes to show you how every studio is unique, because you could not recreate this if you tried anywhere.
Absolutely.
I don't know anything about acoustics or anything, but we have a ton of concrete around the perimeter. You have brick here.
Yep.
There's concrete floors exposed. What does concrete do? Are there benefits to it? And really, we don't hear it at all.
Right. It's not necessarily that there are benefits. I feel that there are benefits to multiple differing surfaces.
Right.
So the brick is really doing a bit of a diffusion thing for me that I like. To be honest, the plan is to still cover up this remaining brick with a similar panel. I have the makings in the front there. And it's be another few days before I get them up. But that's not to say that I haven't gotten great dead drum sounds right here. It's just a matter of I have a lot of moving gobos and lots of moving blankets and stuff. Really, I'm just sort of I'm taking what I got and doing what I do with it, and I'm happy. You know, there was a time when when the oven was here and this was a brick wall. I wouldn't have been able to cut drums in this corner without completely covering this wall, which I did. It was all covered with a big panel. Because it was just the brick was too close to the kit, and there was nowhere for the sound to go. But here, like, there's all this space now. I find that like a FET condenser right in front of the kit in Omni, so it's here, and this is the center of the room. Hearing the entire room, that mic sounds great to me. So I mean, whatever is happening in here is cool. And I'm happy about that. Having the gobos is a thing for sure, and I didn't have as many, and I bought quite a few more. And that's been important in order to get really tight drum sounds. But generally I find that people, you know, like the total dead drum zone thing was a thing for quite a while, and some records really need it. But engineers don't tend to necessarily need that. They want some kind of something in between. They want some room, they want a bit of deadness, they want whatever. So I'm trying to sort of, within my own confines, cater to all those different tastes.
Especially in the genres that you work into a lot. There's that live feel is pretty sought after nowadays. So I know from your work and your process that I know you do a lot to tape. We'll talk about that when we get in the control room. But it looks to me like the way things are set up that you like to do some live recording. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, it's different for everything, for sure. I do really like to record a band. You know, bands that are a unit. Like I'm really into that kind of thing. You know, especially if they're making like some kind of rock music or, you know, garage or whatever. I've been really into that lately. And yeah, most of those bands want to cut live, and they should cut live because that's how they do it, right? So I do have a lot of isolation opportunities here, which are usually how I choose to do things. I mean, it is nice to get stuff in the same room, but then like your mix will suffer. I mean, you know, depending on what you're looking for, but mostly if you're trying to make something that's palatable for a lot of people, like you're going to want to mix it properly with isolation. So this tends to be just the drum room. I mean, this is our live room, and everybody would stand in here. But it tends to be that only the drums are firing in here, and then probably a ghost vocal. I find the SM7 is pretty good at rejecting. I mean, like you'll get drums in it, so it's not usually a usable vocal. And I put the vocalist far away that like you don't really hear the vocal in the drums. Or I mean, I have these gobos, I can put them in front, and they sort of do the job. Failing that, if we're looking for a live vocal, I've actually, as part of the reno, like in addition to taking this bagel oven out, I did a bunch of connectivity stuff that I didn't have before. That I felt was sort of essential. Dave McKinnon, who used to work at 6 Nassau, which is just down the road, but they've closed.
Okay.
He came in here to engineer a couple of sessions. He's a fantastic engineer, awesome guy. And he just sort of suggested, it would be helpful if all of the zones were wired up to the desk, which is something I had sort of thought of, but he was totally right. It needed to happen. So now the front area, which is sort of the kitchen, there's plenty of room there, and there is a window through, like, from the live room to that zone.
Right.
So I've now wired 4 tie lines and 2 headphone lines up there.
Cool.
And same with this booth that I've built in the back, which is next to the control room.
Right.
And there's an amp box that's all wired up to the desk too. So in theory, and actually the truth is, for a bass amp, if I'm running a bass amp while the band is tracking live, I'll probably tuck it behind a gobo in the corner of this drum room, and they're sufficiently isolated that it's not a problem.
Totally. What would you use that room for? Because it's a bit more live in there, a bit more reflection.
It's quite ambient in there. I would put maybe a vocalist in there because they can see through the glass. It's not always a keeper vocal that I'll get in there, but it's something I've tried for sure. But no, I've like reamped amps up there and stuff like that. And once in a while, I'll leave this door open to the drum room and just put a drum mic in there. And that's a really interesting sound.
That'd be cool.
That was my pal Paul Phelan, who works here sometimes. He works here monthly, a few days a month. He came up with that and sort of recommended it to me.
Sure. Would you do one mic or 2?
Usually just one. I'm kind of a mono guy, as you can see. I have this mono overhead.
Nice.
Not that I'm opposed necessarily to stereo overheads or stereo in general. I like the idea of really precisely placing something in a mix.
Right.
And I don't necessarily I'll take a Leslie in stereo, but I don't necessarily hard pan it so that the whole mix is Leslie. I'll put it somewhere.
Sure.
And I am actually a fan of taking a Leslie in mono too, certainly the top.
Really? That's cool.
And then I often don't even take the bottom of the Leslie. I find it just muddies up my low end.
Right.
And same with drum overheads. If I took stereo, I wouldn't really hard pan them and have them all over.
Right.
I want the drum kit to be somewhere in the mix as opposed to everywhere.
It's funny you say that because it's everyone's default to do that.
Right.
Because when you solo it, it sounds cool.
Right.
But when you listen to mixes from anyone, Grammy-winning mixes to anything, you realize, whoa, they're right there. They're sitting right in the middle, and it sounds great, and it sounds huge.
Yeah, there's all different ways of doing it. Often you'll find people who will hit the chorus and then will widen everything at the chorus. That's definitely cool. A trick that exists. I don't really do it a lot. That's just maybe not the type of music that I make.
Sure.
But it's certainly a thing. For me, I don't know, when I think of mixing a song, it really depends on the type of music I'm working with. But I'm into the records that got made when 8-track was new.
Right.
Not 8-track tapes, when 8-track recording was new.
Right.
And so when there were a limited number of tracks, but there were enough overdubs and enough weird things that they could put them in different places in the stereo field and make it a really interesting sounding mix.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I've always loved that music, but the guy who's brought it back to the forefront of my mind is Daniel Romano, who I work with a bunch. And I don't really work on his records. I've played on his records. Yeah. But the way that he and Kenny Meehan, who works on his records too, works with me a bunch here, the way that they go about putting things in interesting spots in the field are very interesting.
Yeah, well, it's something about, like you said, about the limitations is an art form in itself.
Absolutely.
And one of the most inspiring studio tours we've ever done is with Dan Edmonds. You know Dan.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And he's got a little setup of 8 tracks, I think, and a little mixer. And when I was there and hearing what he had, and of course he's a phenomenal player and songwriter, and his musicians were phenomenal as well. It was just blew me away to think that he's doing more with 8 than most guys, myself included, are doing with infinite amounts.
It's true. And that's we can get into the control room and we'll talk about my tape machine a bit, but that's I use that machine less for its sound and more for its limitations because I think that if a band's coming in and wants to cut live, well, they should get a take that means something that isn't just not something I'm going to paste together.
Totally.
Which isn't to say that I haven't done that. Sometimes it's important. Sometimes a take has such a thing, but there's a flub that you want to fix, and so I do it in Pro Tools. I don't splice. Nobody really. I don't know anybody who splices tape anymore.
Right.
I'm sure there are people, but it's just such an endeavor.
Right.
You might as well do it digitally. Anyway, really it's the limitation of that machine that I find the most interesting aspect of it. It has a sound. It has it does a tape compression thing, but it's a transformerless design. but my desk has transformers in it, so that kind of makes up for there's like a transformer sound going on there.
Yeah. Well, the keys real quick before we hit in the control room. I want to ask you about, this looks like it's in great shape, this Wurlitzer.
Yeah, the Wurlitzer belongs actually to Paul Phelan, who works here, like I say, a few days a month, and sometimes assists me. It's as far as we can tell, it's a fairly early 200, which of course predated the 200A. So I think we were told it would have been about 66.
Okay.
If you look closely, it's not actually black. It's avocado green, which is a rare color.
Oh yeah.
For this type of piano.
Interesting.
It was just serviced and modded by my dear old friend Adam Melnick, who's a Hamiltonian.
Oh yes.
And a fine keyboard technician. Who helps me with a lot of stuff around here. It was modded to 200A spec, which was just a variation of the circuit that's a lot less noisy. So now it's like nice and quiet. I record it often with a 421 right on this little speaker in front, because frankly, the speaker has a sound. Like it, just like the breakup of the speaker, just like is the sound of this piano to me. There is a direct out, which is very useful when tracking live too, and I can always reamp that, or I could do all kinds of stuff with it. The truth is, running it direct through one of the Ward Beck strips is great. It sounds really good that way.
Well, to me, it makes me feel so good inside, because I recorded one of these 6 months ago, and I Googled it, and somebody said 57 right here, and I did that, and you're right. It's almost the one that you keep. Yeah, and you get a little bit of that too, because it's so close.
Totally.
It's very cool. Yeah. Now, I don't know anything about these, but tell me, when these come up and around, there's these, and then you see the Rhodes a lot. What's the difference? And these are more expensive.
Right.
What's the difference between a Wurlitzer and a Rhodes?
They have different sounds. It's a different construction. I don't know exactly what the difference is inside. I know that there are tines inside both of them, as far as I understand.
Are they different eras?
No, they would be similar eras. The Rhodes was a company unto itself, as far as I know, that Fender then purchased. Okay. Wurlitzer, of course, is an old piano company that started making. Even before these, they made the 200 series models. I believe there were 240, etc., which you would hear on like Ray Charles' "What I Say" is one of the earlier ones. Adam Melnick tells me that those keyboards are a nightmare to work on. Really? And these were an updated, just to make them easier to work on, more reliable, the action better.
The red ones?
They'd be kind of a weird beige color. Oh, okay. And they have sort of a boxier kind of thing. A Rhodes piano sounds, it doesn't have the same attack as a Wurlitzer. It's got more of a sort of a subtle kind of later, kind of a chimey thing. Yeah. And there's a place for a Rhodes for sure. I was happy when Paul brought this in, because I find that with some EQ, I can get a Wurlitzer sounding kind of Rhodesy. But a Rhodes, it's hard to give it back that attack that the Wurlitzer has.
That's a cool point.
I really like, I find that the Wurlitzer is a really widely applicable sound, and I like it a lot.
That's really cool.
The truth is, these three keyboard instruments are sort of my main go-tos in terms of putting keys on a record. I have a little bit, I have a little synth, and sometimes people will bring in synths, but in terms of analog piano instruments, these are my three go-tos.
That's cool.
The organ is an M3.
Okay.
1956, and came to me also from Adam, Adam and I go back, we were in bands together, we were in high school together, so when something interesting comes in, he usually calls me.
That's cool.
And I think it was just somebody's grandpa had it at the cottage.
Really?
And never played it. And it needed a little bit of service, and Adam did it, but
before, I was going to ask you, before this sound came into pop, or not pop, but indie rock music, where were these residing? Churches, or? Yeah.
If you talk to Adam, he gets calls from churches a lot. Every church wanted to have an organ, and certainly now is really the era when a lot of them are finally tanking.
Right.
Perhaps a congregant comes along and wants to make a donation, and they want to donate a new organ. Well, what do you donate? If you donate an organ in 2017, you walk into Long & McQuaid and buy a new Hammond keyboard organ, right?
Right, that's right.
So they're throwing these things out.
Yeah.
And I think he tends to get them from there, or just households that it's not as common to have. Well, certainly it's not very common to have an organ in the living room anymore. It's less common even to have a piano in the living room now, which is why there's all these pianos out there that are, free.
And would the Leslie come with it, or
the Leslie I had first, to be honest.
Okay.
I bought it to tour with Sitting Color because I was playing a little bit of organ in the show, really not very much. But I got this bright idea that I had to travel with a Leslie if I was going to play an organ sound, even though I was touring with a Nord. But it traveled with me quite a bit, and it it probably played like 3/4 of the shows, and then the other quarter, the crew was like, "We're not bringing that thing in tonight." But this is also an Adam Melnick deal that's like assembled from parts. I told him that it didn't matter if the cabinet was junky because it was going to be on the road anyway.
Right.
But the amp was pretty pristine. Came out of some other. It's a Model 145, and it came out of another 145 or 147 that was, you know, somebody's grandma played it after church or whatever, and the tubes are original. And
crazy.
Yeah, I've got the combo preamp pedal, which is right here, which is okay.
Oh, wow.
This is just to get a 1/4-inch signal into the Leslie.
Oh, okay.
But then Adam built me, years ago, he built me this, which is essentially a Garnet Herzog type thing, so which means it's a Fender Champ circuit with an input level and a master level. But it also, he added this 6-pin control so that it can power a Leslie, and there's also a speed switch here.
Wow.
So it's like a preamp. I mean, it is a preamp that can power the Leslie, or you can run 1/4-inch out into the in of another amp, and then drive the tube really hard and get like a, you know, a distorted sound.
That's so cool.
So generally, if I'm running 1/4-inch into the Leslie, I use this. This is handy, but I mean, this is sort of the better sounding thing.
And have you ever toured with something like this?
Not with this, no.
Do people tour at all, or are they just faking it with a Nord
They
in a
do,
box?
but it depends. I mean, most of them are Nords in boxes, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
You know, you'd have to look up Nord Shame, which is a blog where they document how different people have hidden their Nords. You know, you'd have to be at a pretty high level of touring to tour with this. No, it definitely happens.
Yeah.
I would say that if you're already at that level where there's an actual organ traveling, they tend to be B3s, which are this is like the home version of the B3.
Right,
it's the
okay.
M3.
Right.
And the B3 is quite large, and they definitely exist. They're cased up with their matching Leslie 122s.
Yeah.
Backline companies own them. Most of the jazz guys will fly in and have them backlined, and so they'll, like, you know, they'll want to play a B3 for sure, but it'll come from a local place.
Right.
On the road, like, yeah, you'd have to be like, I'm sure the guy in like Tedeschi Trucks tours with a B3. Even the truth is, the guy from Wilco, I think, stopped.
Yeah, I was going to ask
bringing an
Wilco.
organ.
I thought that would be, but
I think
he's
he
got
used
so
to.
many keys up there.
Yeah. And I don't think they do it anymore.
Yeah.
You know what? The Sheepdogs, Seamus has an A100 as far as I know, which is another model of a B3. It's like the living room version of the B3. And I would say that probably only travels on like road stuff where they leave from Toronto. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure they do numerous fly-ins.
You probably got to give your crew a nice Christmas bonus if you're doing
if they're going to move a B3.
every night.
You better be B3. So you better be Jimmy Smith if you're going to tour with a B3. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it better be central to your sound if you're going to go to the treble. Which is kind of sad because, like, a real instrument is amazing to play, but then again, the emulations are so good.
Right.
We'll get to that in the control room. Like, I use a lot of emulation in there, even on the analog stuff, and like, you know, for the cost and the ease of use and all that stuff, sometimes that's just the reality of the situation. This business no longer has the kind of money in it that it used to. You know what I mean? So it's, you know, people have to do what they have to do.
That's fair. Yeah. What about the piano here? Any story with the piano?
Yeah, the piano is a Heinzmann. It's a 1918, and Heinzmann's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Heinzmanns are ubiquitous in Toronto because they were made here. For like 100 years, there was a factory in the Junction where they built these things. So cool. So there's tons of them around, but this one is unique. I have a 1905 at home, which I love, but it doesn't have the like tightness of this one. This one I was able to find, and somebody had put probably a few $1,000s into it. There, it's got new hammers, new bass strings, and new key tops, which to my mind is like $3,000 of work at least. And I think it was done around the 90s, and you can tell the hammers are all hand numbered in pencil, which apparently is a Robert Lowry thing. So it means that he would have done it, which is great. He's he's a famous, well, his company is a famous piano tech company and reseller.
A lot of these don't stay in tune anymore. And
right. I mean, I have regular tunings, which of course you need. You got to have them tuned, usually before sessions.
Sure.
And even if there aren't sessions coming in, I try and have it done at least quarterly.
Right.
So the keys are no longer ivory because the key tops were replaced, but in terms of their uniformity, they're very uniform. Like, they're plastic, but they're very easy to play. And
That's awesome.
it's really crisp sounding, and the bass is really tight.
Yeah.
Because of the hammers and the strings.
Nice.
It's way tighter than my piano at home, and it's just such a pleasure to record. And I'll record it like a bunch of different ways.
So it'll stay here when you record it?
Oh yeah.
And
just
then,
lives right here. And I will throw mics in back sometimes. Like I'll throw like a pair of dynamic mics, 57s. I've done a pair of SM7s, which I really like in back.
Okay, cool.
A friend of mine, John Dinsmore, who runs the Lincoln County Social Club, if I recall correctly, has 1 or 2 609s that just live behind his upright piano. They never move. The flat Sennheiser mics, right?
Right.
They're a dynamic that's similar to a 57, which is a brilliant idea because actually a dynamic mic on the back of an upright piano, I think, is like, it's about as close as it gets for me.
Cool.
And I also hang a pair of condensers in front. I take the front off and all that stuff. That's definitely a sound too.
Yeah.
And you can pan those really nicely and get it close. You know, this is an upright grand, and you can get it sort of grandy sounding.
Sure.
But if I'm putting this on a rock and roll record, like 1 or 2 dynamic mics in the back that's the key for me.
And you don't need a room mic or anything?
I mean, depends what you're doing, but certainly if you're playing it with like a drummer, like not even a thing, because like that's not how it would sound in the room.
Yeah.
If you had a drummer and you had the piano up next to it, you're in a little like roadhouse or whatever, like you wouldn't be hearing the room piano. You'd be hearing like just the attack of the hammers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, strangely, that's what I hear on the back.
It's interesting that the piano thing is like, because like what you were saying earlier, is that there are so many of these, and people want them gone. And I see that it's like they're all free, but you have to spend a couple $100 to move it.
Right.
And I imagine this, I don't know what the soundboard's like, but I imagine this would be pretty heavy.
Oh yeah.
But
I mean, what I've done in the case of both my pianos, this one and the home piano, is I've just brought a piano technician with me.
Looking. That's cool.
Like strangely, I seem to be acquainted with like at least 4 different piano technicians just through the people that I know, but they happen to be also piano technicians. My friends Sarah Davignon and Andrew Patton, they're married. They're a couple, and they're both piano technicians. And Sarah came with me to see both the pianos, I think. Certainly my home one. And there's a cost there too, though. They're professional people, but for me it was worth it before buying the piano to make sure that it was in shape. Yeah. And I'd recommend that to anybody buying a piano. Like, you're not going to spend a lot on the piano. Spend a little bit on a professional who will tell you whether it's the right thing to buy, so that you don't end up with a junker that you'd pay to move it into your house and then move it out again. Totally. It would be a nightmare.
Well, I wish you had said that 10 years ago, but back in my naive days, I bought something about this size from Toronto to Hamilton. I bought it on eBay for $50. In hindsight, I should have paid nothing. Yeah. But I brought it all the way home. I bought lunch for all my strong buddies who came with me. And I had, my music room was in the basement. Oh, God. And it didn't fit down the, you know how when you go down, the ceiling gets lower? Oh, so it sat, it was a $50. It sat in my backyard until I paid $300 to have someone come take it away.
Yeah,
that was
how it goes.
A terrible experience.
What a bummer. And yeah, I mean, the movers, they charge by the stair too, right? So you got to get them from like a main floor place. I mean, I'm glad now that I have 2 pianos that I can trust. This one is an amazing studio instrument. I love my one at home. I feel good about not having to think about another piano until like the glorious day comes where I have enough room for a grand, either here or at home, and then maybe I'll think about it. But for now, I'm pretty happy.
It's nice that this is not going to go out of date either.
No, exactly. I mean,
okay, so everything back, we're in the control room here, and Jay will get a ton of B-roll of what we're looking at here. I've said to you this while we were setting up, just this like concrete look here makes me feel like I'm in Italy or something. But right on. It's really, really cool. That Italian alt country vibe.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But what's the process for tracking? Because us, like some of the home studio people, we go into a 4-channel and right into Pro Tools. Right. What's your process?
It differs depending on the act, of course. Mm-hmm. Like. There is a digital setup here. I got the Apollo 16, and I love it. And actually, even when I'm using the tape machine, the Apollo figures highly into the process. Okay. Basically, the Snake zeros to the desk, the first 16 channels of the desk. This is a Warbeck ST console, manufactured around 1985 or so. Okay. Interestingly, the tape machine, the tracking machine, is a Tascam MS-16 that's manufactured in 1983, and by the time they manufactured that tape machine, they were onto a transformerless design. They had removed all the transformers from the front end of the cards, hoping to give it a more discreet sound, a less sort of muddiness, less fatness, and of course, like, for the type of music that I make, I want things to sound big and round and whatever.
Yeah.
But the desk, even though it's later, for some reason Ward Beck did not really switch up the design very much, and there are transformers on these preamps.
Wow.
So it's like, it's the same design as it would have been, 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
Or a similar design, I should say. The circuit is a little different. These are the M520 preamps, and in the 70s they issued the 470s, 480s, 490s. But as far as I understand, they're very similar in design, and they do sound great. There are 24 preamps in the desk, and to be quite honest, I have virtually no other preamps in the room because I found the desk and I loved it, and they sound great. I mean, there's a modern thing where people like a lot of different types of preamps, and they choose their preamps based on the source and all that stuff, and I get that, and perhaps one day I'll be there, but for now, these sound so great, and every record that I love was made on a console where everything had the same preamp, and I feel like that's good enough for me if it was good enough for all those amazing records that I love.
Well, we've been to tons of places with Warbeck pre's. Mike here has some, Boxcar has some, Catherine North has some. And actually they come up, they're quite sought after, just a strip racked into a box.
They are, and actually I bought this desk from a studio in North Bay that was closing, and I was surprised that he didn't want to just rack up the pre's and sell them. He would have probably made more money.
No way.
But he wanted to see the desk go somewhere where it was going to be used, and I really respected that. And I mean, it was convenient for me, and it was a good deal and all that stuff. And the former owner, like, I went up to North Bay and checked out the desk, and we made a handshake and all that stuff, and he got like a flatbed trailer and backed it up to his barn where his studio was, and like, not a barn, but a big building. Rolled the desk onto the trailer, like pulled all the modules out, rolled the frame onto the trailer, built a crate around it, and drove it down here, just like to the door, and we all got it in here, which was great, and felt really good. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to get it out of here because we built the door frame after it was in here.
Did you find it online?
No, it was really interestingly, it has to do with this machine. A friend of mine, Lee Rogers, who is the drummer in the band The Mercy Now, is also a recording engineer. He works with Ian Blurden at Pro Gold, and the two of them have the space together, and Lee had two of those machines, and I really loved them. I've been really into those 1-inch machines. For some reason, I like them. And he was selling them, and I didn't have a place at the time, and my wife was like, do not bring 2 full-size tape machines into this apartment. So I had to, and he didn't want a lot of money for them. It was foolish. I should have bought, at least one. Anyway, I didn't. And then later I found this one, and I love it, and it's great. And Lee called me out of the blue and was like, hey, I have some spare parts for that Tascam machine. He had gotten rid of his machines. He was like, the parts are yours if you want them. By the way, a guy from my hometown is selling this large format Ward Beck console. Do you know anybody who wants it? And so I talked to the guys at Candle where I was at the time, and we kind of decided like it was going to be too big. There was already a console there. But then a few months later, I met my business partner, and all of a sudden I was looking for a console.
Wow.
So I went back to Lee and
that's awesome.
Spoke to the fellow.
So your snake comes in here.
Yes.
And then where does it go from here?
Normals to the first 16 channels.
Okay.
So, like I said, there's 24 pre's, and thereafter there are 12 stereo line rails. Each of these blue faders is actually a stereo rail. Okay. So there's a left and a right in. And these are just line level. So I guess, this was the CFTO console. Like, they mixed the news on this console for years, as far as I know. And, oops. So I guess, this is just a guess, but I suppose if you had a number of different sources, like probably VHS, different stories, each of them would have their own little level, and it would be in stereo, of course, because it's television. So, in this era, they were already doing stereo television. And then I suppose this was 24 channels for different studio mics. I guess your weatherman had to have a couple of mics that, I don't really know how they mic up.
Unbelievable.
I would imagine it was a lot of booms and stuff, but I mean, who knows? So anyway, in theory on this console, I can use 24 in, and then I can bring stereo stems back. I could bring as many as 12 stereo stems back and then sum them. I don't often do that, to be honest.
Okay.
I should.
Yeah.
I should give it a whirl.
That's really cool.
I don't have that many outs. I only have 16 outs right now.
Right.
But it's just not, these days with mixes, like, revisions are key. Right. It's highly important to be able to revise mixes.
Right.
And just the recall on something like this would just be difficult and inaccurate.
Right.
And that's too bad. However, I have to say next week I'm doing a live to 2-track weather station session. Tamara's coming in with a band, and it's a Southern Souls thing, and they're cutting literally. We're gonna get it through the desk. We're gonna summit. We're gonna go straight to the 1/4-inch 2-track machine live mix, which is highly exciting for me.
Yeah. No
so
kidding.
I won't even use these faders. I'll be using literally the level to tape faders, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Really interesting.
And so what type of, when does it go into Pro Tools, and what type of in-the-box stuff do you do?
So if you don't patch in the tape machine, the tape machine is its own separate patch situation.
Yeah.
Then the snake will normal to the pre's.
Yeah.
There's 24 channels on the snake, there's 24 pre's here, they will normal right to them. And then there are 16 ins on the Apollo, and these first 16 strips will normal right to the Apollo.
Cool.
So they're hitting Pro Tools. I'm on the subscription. I got the latest Pro Tools.
Wow.
Whenever it's coming out, I got it.
Is there, there is EQ here?
Yeah, there's EQ on the way in.
Do you use that?
I do. And I like it. It could be a little more effective.
Right.
Like, I'm sure that there are mods for these modules that would be, that might make them sound a little more...
Are there any filters or gates at all, or?
No, this is it. I mean,
EQ,
there's a couple, you can see there's a couple slots here, and there's these slots up here.
Yeah.
Wardbeck made... compressors. They made all kinds of different stuff that I could get. I could even get meters, like input meters, for all of these, which I don't have. But I am not finding it necessary.
Sure.
I mean, I love toys, but to be quite honest, like, this is a system that I've grown to be quite happy with, and I feel like I can do good work on it. And
that's more important than having tons of stuff.
Yeah, there's like, each of the strips has a program and peak, so it'll be green when you're getting good signal,
right,
and then red when it's peaking.
Right.
And same with the Apollo. The Apollo's in the rack here, and I have meter on the front.
Meters there, yeah.
And when I first got it, I really did not want to use this console program. This is their,
I'm familiar with it.
And I took the time to learn it, and it was like, it really changed my whole workflow. I love it, and it's like,
That's awesome.
I wouldn't want to really work without it. It's very, I run all my Q mixes out of there.
Yeah, you're making a lot of use of the sends in there.
Yeah.
That's
all
awesome.
of my headphone mixes come from here, and even playback. I mean, I send playback to phones through the virtual channels here.
Right.
I have my old Apollo Twin, which was my interface before I bought the 16, and it's here for extra processing, and my TalkBack runs through it.
Nice.
And
nice.
Yeah, it's certainly convenient. So, I mean, that's sort of the analog digital setup. So you hit the strips, you're using these strips, and then it will hit console, and then it will hit Pro Tools. And that, to me, I can make that sound great. I'm happy with how it sounds. And certainly I have people who come to me because they're interested in the tape thing.
Yeah.
And I love working on the machine. It's a bit of a different process.
Right.
And all it involves is patching it in between, obviously, the strips and the Apollo. So there's 16 in and 16 out for the machine. They're on this bay right here next to the big bay.
Right.
I patch them all in, patch them all out, and so the signal will hit the strip. It will then hit the machine, and I have to read the VUs on the front of the machine. Yeah. And then I'm hearing back again through Pro Tools here, through console, through UAD console. I don't even need to open Pro Tools to work on the machine. I treat this like a virtual console. I treat the UAD console program like a virtual console to listen back.
Okay.
I could be, if I wanted to, and this is how I started working when I first got in here, I could be bringing them back on these faders, on these blue faders. Right. So I have all my ins and then all my listen back.
Right.
It got a little sketchy. It was a lot of patching.
Sure.
And
it's a lot of cable.
Yeah, and just not as, it wasn't a really practical way to work.
Right.
And I figured, like, it would be so rare for a record not to be converted at some point anyway.
Right.
I might as well convert it after the machine. And then I can throw things, like this console program, you can use plugins in real time on the way in. So like preamps, compressors, EQ, all that stuff. And every one of these preamps, every one of these plugins just sounds amazing. Like I'm really happy with like the LA2A collection and like the 1176s and all that stuff. Like they're all very, very usable.
We were just talking about that addiction with Crispin, about how they put stuff on sale and they give you coupons.
Yeah. I use all of it.
It's great. That's cool.
And I like the effects too, like the BX20 reverb, the EMT 140. They have this new like Galaxy Space Echo, which is basically a Roland Space Echo, but they stopped branding it Roland.
Right. That's really encouraging to hear coming from you in such an analog domain out there, and with the console praising UAD.
You can't argue with your ears.
Yeah, it's true.
And frankly, like we talked about this out there, like I'm not running like the most hotshot joint in town. I'm running a place that is my tool that allows me to do what I want to do when it comes to making records. If I had the bread, I'd have like a rack full of LA2As and Pultecs and all that stuff, because I understand that's the type of sound shaping that I want to do. The sort of broad Pultec thing is totally my thing. The slow optical LA2A, like I love those compressors.
But people come here for you.
Sure, and like this is my practical reality, and it's great. It works really well. I wouldn't. Granted, I don't have a rack of LA2As to compare it to, but certainly, put my product up against whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't think you'd be able to tell.
No, exactly. We were talking about the Apollo just a couple hours ago, and I got one a couple months ago, and when I was on the fence about it, because it's an investment, and not even to mention the plugins, but I was thinking about, you see them in Nashville, you see them in LA, you see them in all the producers that you admire, but then my mentors and the people locally that I respect, everyone had one. Today we've seen two, and it's like, that's a real testament, I think.
For sure. My next step is I just want to get another 8-channel one, so I have 24.
One.
Really, that's just my next thing. And I want more processing so I can use more of the plugins at once. I already have 6 of their processing units or whatever, 4 in the 16 and then 2 in the twin.
Well, wait till Christmas when you get the processing for free.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Great.
The satellite comes free.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
the satellite would be nice to have too, just to be able to take it around.
So when you go to tape, I really don't understand this, so explain it to me like I'm 5. But are you recording onto the tape, or is it just going? Okay, and then is it recording simultaneous in Pro Tools or afterwards?
No, afterwards. I'll dump it afterwards.
Oh, okay.
I could run Pro Tools at the same time.
Okay.
But you never know. Like, I worked at Howard Billerman's studio in Montreal once, like just as a player. I was called to play on a record, but I definitely was into observing his process. And he runs one of those MCI machines, the JH16, JH24, a 16-track 2-inch machine.
Okay.
And he will run Pro Tools simultaneously so that every take hits Pro Tools.
Oh, okay.
And it hits it, I believe, off the repro head. But he's monitoring the sync head so that, of course, there's 3 heads, right? The sync head you would hear it in real time. The repro head is slightly after the sync head. So if you were monitoring the repro head, you would hear the music delayed, and that would be fine if you were in here, but you have to run your headphones somehow, and obviously everybody in there needs it in real time. So everybody would be monitoring the sync head, but the repro head is supposed to sound the best.
Oh, okay.
So he would be somehow patching from the repro head into Pro Tools to make sure that he had every take in Pro Tools, but then he'd go back, because there's only so much space on a tape. If you're at 15 IPS, you have 33 minutes on a real tape.
Okay.
So, and 15 IPS is a popular speed. So he would be going back on the tape and going over old takes, but if he had to like grab anything like old audio, if he had to replace something or whatever, he had it all in Pro Tools. It's a very interesting workflow, and I liked it, but I haven't adopted it.
No,
generally, I work on the machine, and we really only keep like good takes.
Right.
So generally, for one tune, we'll keep a maximum of 2.
Okay.
Like we'll keep one only if it's like so good that we're worried we can't better it.
Right.
We'll try one more.
Yeah.
And if that's the keeper, cool. And if the other one's the keeper, I'll go back and start the next song over the.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And some people would say, how can you throw away audio like that? But it's just a different process. It's just, it just involves forcing the musicians to play it until it's right.
Yeah.
I want to desperately put a picture on the wall of Willie Dixon, who played bass with Muddy Waters and produced numerous sessions for Chess Records. If you've ever worked with me here, you have heard me tell this story. He was recording music in the time like before overdubs.
Yeah.
So as a producer, he was like an arranger, and he was talking tempos with people, talking feel and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was probably not uncommon to cut dozens of takes of something. And also, as the producer, it was his job to listen back to the takes and decide, well, which one was the keeper. And the story is that he always chose the second best take because he wanted his product to sound human and not to sound robotic.
Wow.
He wanted it to sound, so if there was a little flub, he might favor that take over a perfect take. And I'm really into getting things right, but I also feel strongly about the human element. And I actually didn't used to even work on click for quite a long time. Now I realize it's, in some cases, a necessity, but I don't always use it.
Right.
I like when things breathe a little bit. I like when it sounds like a band.
Yeah.
And I like the sort of middle ground of really wanting to get it good enough that when you hit the tape without edits, it sounds good.
Yeah.
But also to have that human
I totally agree with that. A buddy of mine was just over last night showing me a demo he has in Dropbox, and he was showing it to me, and he's like, this isn't the final vocal, this is just a scratch vocal. And I was like, don't change that vocal. Don't make that better, because it was something raw.
There you go.
Human is a great word for it, because we're working with so many, especially nowadays, we're working with so many bits and bytes and digital things. It's almost like we were talking about that window. It's like the birds, this is real. Like the squeaky chairs, that's the real. And I think when I listen to, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot or some of these crazy records, it's the intimate moments are not necessarily the music. It's some of the human elements and the the sounds. That's really cool.
You want to balance it in a way too. Like, you don't want to be putting out stuff that I'm very much a fan of, like, working on something until it's done. Like, I don't want to put out half-finished things or anything like that. As an artist, I've suffered from that a little bit before, and I don't want to, certainly my clients aren't interested in that, and I'm not interested in that for them.
Yeah.
But yes, there's a middle ground somewhere. There's a way for things to be human and sort of not terribly refined, not cut and pasted and all that stuff, while still being good.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's sort of what I'm trying to achieve, certainly with the tape machine. We were talking earlier, I think off camera, about how I think the tape machine sounds good. This particular tape machine, it sounds good, but it's really more here because of its process. The process that it forces me to use.
Totally.
That's really what it's all about for me.
It's such a cool system, because I think really when it comes to these big, bigger size commercial pristine type of things, like, people can find that, but there are certain bands, and you were talking with one today, who will come here specifically for this sound, especially nowadays, especially now that like everyone can get a digital recording.
Absolutely.
I think this type of setup is more sought after.
I think more and more. And I mean, you can take this for what it is, because it's coming from a guy who makes records. But frankly, if I was seeking a place to make a record or somebody to make a record with, like, I think the only obvious way to do this is to choose the person who you think is going to work the best with you and will use their tools to do what you want for your music. Because you can look at gear lists all day long. I mean, I'll bring up my buddy Daniel Romano again, who yes, I play with him and we're pals and everything like that, but like, he has made some amazing sounding records, and certainly in the early days, he was making them with like whatever was around.
Right.
And in some cases, like, I was there was like a preamp and a half that was working and a couple of mics, and he made records that like people have heard and loved, and really it's a lot about his songs, and it's also about that he got what he needed out of what was there, which is the advice I gave Dan Edmonds before he was doing his thing. I was like, he was talking about whether to spend a lot of money on a compressor, and I told him that same thing. I was like, Romano's records, how good they sound. That's a guy who knows his equipment and is doing his best with his equipment. That's why I would say, like, these are my tools. This is what I love to use. I worked a day at Phase 1 recently, which is like a big, 70s era, corporate big studio where the gear is amazing. But it's a very, like, the budget there is wildly different than what I had to build my place. And I had a great day. I really liked it. am I going to spend the money on a Neve desk like that to put in here?
Yeah.
Like, only if I write a Katy Perry hit.
Yeah,
You know what
that's
I mean?
true. Yeah.
Which is not likely.
Yeah.
For me, like, these are the things that allow me to do what I want. It's the stuff that I have spent my 10,000 hours on.
Yeah.
And therefore, I
smart.
feel like I can do the things that are in here. I can execute that stuff with this stuff and do my job effectively.
That's amazing. Good stuff. Well, thanks so much for having us,
you.
man. I really appreciate it.
Right on.
I love it. And you know what? As you were saying that, I think because we've got to meet so many different people and see different spaces, I think I would say the same thing is that if I were going to make a record, the first would be the person, the second would be the room, the vibe, what makes me feel creative, and then the gear would be next.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of rooms I've seen where the gear is cool, but I didn't feel creative there.
Gear is great. Good gear is great, especially in the hands of creative people.
You can bring good gear out to the woods if you want.
Sure. In the hands of creative people, especially creative engineers, like, the good stuff is great, especially microphones. Like
That's true.
Old Neumanns, it's hard to argue with a great sounding old Neumann. But there are many records that were made on all kinds of different, with all different gear.
Totally.
And it's really kind of about the songs and about what you did with that gear.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, buddy.
Cheers.
Congratulations. It's a great place.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jay.